35 years after putting her son up for adoption, this mom received a strange letter. A Pittsburgh mother was in her 50s when she finally found the son she had put up for adoption decades before. She never expected to see him randomly in the streets, much less on one of the biggest days of her year. Veterans of marathons will tell you that you should expect the unexpected during the race, and the unexpected is just what happened to this mother, who never dreamed she'd need to be bringing tissues. Stacy Fakes from Pittsburgh's Plum neighborhood is the woman in question. She's somewhat of a wonder mother who manages to raise her two daughters at the same time she prepares for runs like the Pittsburgh Half Marathon. She does this despite her age, as running gets harder with the wear and tear that comes with maturing. Fakes is also a member of Team Red, White, and Blue, an organization that provides help to war veterans. When she finally made the acquaintance of a very special member of this organization, her life changed forever. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story. Stephen was also running that day. He'd served in the US Air Force during the Iraq War. His life was heading in an admirable direction, and Stephen was very grateful for the family that raised him. His experience in the Air Force had helped to ground Stephen, and he wouldn't have been the same without it. But there was always a piece of him that felt was missing when he was adopted. At the starting line ahead of the big race, an odd envelope was handed to Stacy. As she turned it over in her hand, she couldn't have known what would be inside. Clearly, there was some sort of letter or message someone was trying to give her, she thought as she turned the envelope over in her hands. As she ripped it open and pulled out a piece of paper, she couldn't have realized it would bring her back with someone she'd seen long ago. Stacy Fakes gave birth to her child when she was just 15, which is quite a young age to become a mother. In the years that followed, she tried in vain to find her firstborn. Pennsylvania law at the time, though, made it extremely difficult for her to get any information. Her search went on for decades as she hit wall after wall of bureaucracy. By her 50s, it seemed like it was a lost cause. By the time the laws had been loosened, the documents were thought to have been lost in a flood. Stacy had remained determined to find her son later in life. Despite spending most of her time trying to find her son, she never gave up even when it seemed like she'd never see him again. In a similar way, it seemed her son had always wanted to know who his biological parents were, and when he finally got the chance to get a hold of his birth certificate, he acted immediately. Were it not for their mutual dedication, the two never would have met. All the while she'd been looking in vain for her biological son, she was uncertain if he even wanted to be found. She didn't have any plan for what she'd do when she did see him if that day ever did come. Maybe he was angry at her for abandoning him when he was born. When she opened up the letter and saw that it mentioned decades of searching, Stacy knew the letter could only have been written by one person. When she turned around and saw a man walking up to her, she knew it was her boy from many decades ago whom she'd seen but never touched. As he recalled, "I got really choked up and teared up. As we were holding and hugging, she said, 'I never got to hold you,' and that it kind of just broke my heart. It was a prearranged adoption and it wasn't recommended for her to hold me, but how did he track her down?" Just a few days before, Stacy Fakes received a message on Facebook from a man named Stephen Strawn. It was a bit of an awkward message for him to write, and when she read it, what he wrote, she was floored. "Hey, I have a really weird question," Stephen wrote. "Did you put a baby boy up for adoption in 1982? Could it be that after so many decades, her long-lost boy was searching for her just like she'd been searching for him?" It was a bit hard for her to wrap her head around it, but here Stacy was speaking to a man who believed that she might be his mother. The two continued to speak as Stacy excitedly spoke to someone she was almost 100% sure was her offspring. She had to sign off as she was a busy woman, but she'd mentioned the Pittsburgh Half Marathon she was running. It hadn't even crossed her mind, yet she soon discovered her son shared her passion for running. Stacy couldn't believe what was happening. The son she'd searched for in vain for years was finally standing in front of her as a fully grown man. She grabbed her son into a hug that was so tight he could barely breathe. Without saying a word, the two continued hugging for a long time, unable to let go of each other. Both of them had waited for this moment their whole lives, so they let themselves enjoy it for all it was worth. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Stephen had been told at a young age that he was adopted and had lived with the knowledge that his birth mother was somewhere out there for his whole life. While he desperately wanted to find her, he had no way of doing so because his adoptive family didn't even know her full name. But still, even though he was happy with his adoptive parents, Stephen had kept his hope alive that one day he would somehow track down his birth mom. Stephen hadn't been the only one searching. Stacy burst into tears as the two finally embraced as she thought about all the years she'd spent trying to track down the son she had had to give up. His surprise appearance at the marathon had her simply overwhelmed. Here he finally was in her arms for the first time since she said goodbye 35 years earlier. Their mutual search for each other and refusal to give up had finally brought them together. Once the two finally separated from the hug, it was seemingly impossible for them to let go of each other. They continued to hold each other's hands, completely overwhelmed by the fact that they'd found each other. Steven later recalled, "It just felt really surreal because it was finally happening and it happened so fast." And indeed, one moment he'd found her on Facebook, and just a short while later they were holding each other's hands after 35 years of searching. So, what was next for the pair? After talking for an hour, Stacy and Steven decided they should run the marathon together. It was clearly a passion that ran in the genes, as both of them shared a great passion for running. Now that he finally reunited with the birth mother he dreamed about for so long, this marathon would turn into the most memorable one of Steven's life as he ran alongside Stacy. It was a dream come true for both of them, but that wasn't the end of their story. Once they finished the marathon, Stacy was still in total shock. She couldn't believe that after such a long time, this man who she'd given birth to 35 years ago had found her and came to surprise her. The fact that suddenly she was running a marathon alongside her long-lost son really overwhelmed her on many levels. The two of them certainly would have some serious catching up to do. They had their entire lives to talk about. Even though Steven didn't even know her real name until that moment, he never stopped loving his biological mother. And even though Stacy had been forced to make a tough decision by giving her son up for adoption, she'd done it in the hopes that whoever raised him would give him a better life than she could as a teen mom. Stacy believed that she has incredible luck that her son managed to come back to her. But what was in the letter he wrote? This is what was written in the touching card that Steven had been given Stacy before he revealed himself. "It's been 13,075 days since you last saw me. I didn't want to make you wait one more." Clearly, Steven had been counting the days until he would finally meet the woman who gave birth to him. This shows that no matter what happens in life, the bond and love between mother and child is something that is stronger than time and space, and it endures forever. The Pittsburgh Half Marathon is known for being particularly tough and grueling, but their reunion gave them the strength to run side by side. Steven and his mom were there for a good reason, and the fact that they'd finally been able to meet one another after all those years was motivation enough to get them through this tough race. Rather than spending the day catching up, they'd take on a new challenge together. Both Steven and his mother Stacy were incredibly dedicated people. It seemed as though they'd found a way to enjoy something that both of them were passionate about without even knowing one another. They were both also proud patriots who felt a deep love for their country. Together, this meant that they clicked like old friends would and knew almost immediately that they were indeed mother and son. Having found one another again after all these years was a testament to their dedication. The Pittsburgh Half Marathon is in fact a charity run that's dedicated to raising funds for war veterans. Because Steven was a soldier, he knows how important it is to support veterans. It's a cause that's very close to his heart, and he's always run races specifically to help raise money for charities that help them. This time, though, it seemed as though he would be getting the ultimate reward as well as his mother. No medal could replace their newfound relationship. There was no denying that Stacy was an incredibly proud mother. Who could blame her? Steven had been lucky enough to become a good, decent, and upstanding citizen without her love, care, or guidance. While losing him at such a young age was obviously a very difficult process for her as a mother, she could finally rest assured that he'd become a good son, and that was reassurance enough for her. The best reward was knowing he was okay. Ultimately, the chances of Steven and Stacy being able to meet up at a marathon in Pittsburgh is truly an incredible tale. The fact that they were separated from one another for 35 years makes their meeting all the more amazing. There's no doubt that this is an extraordinary story and that the touching reunion between this mother and her son has created hope and happiness in the hearts of many already. If life is a marathon, it's much better to run it together. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.